time to look at the business and markets. It was a better day with the JSE climbing close to 1%, the rand flat. Investors have been talking about a neutral State of the Nation address tomorrow, which possibly won't move the rand much in either direction. Right now, possibly driving the markets is a bit of a reprieve globally around the concerns that we've seen about Russia and the Ukraine. So some optimism out there. Now, you can't please all of the people all of the time, but many sectors of society are hoping that there will be some clarity tomorrow on if and when government is going to implement a basic income grant that is expected to replace the current COVID-19 social relief of distress grant of 350 rand, if there is enough political will to see that through. Many, even business and investment groups, have been calling for a more substantial grant to help the unemployed, many of whom have little prospect of finding a job in South Africa. But government seems to be divided on the issue, with Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana, for instance, last year saying South Africa can't afford this. Well, to discuss, we're joined by Peter Montalto, who is Head of Capital Markets Research at Intellidex. And Peter, before we look at the basic income grant, just tell us overall expectations, anything that you're looking for in terms of a change in policy direction, anything that could move markets tomorrow.
Good afternoon. Well, the SONA is going to be unusually important. We are sitting here in a key ANC elective conference year. There's more than your usual fair share of balancing to be done of various interest groups as a result. But also a lot of policy debates in recent years have now really come to a head. We heard that starting to be laid out in the January 8th and then the ANC Lahotla statements a couple of weeks ago. And it's really, I think, these ideas of social compacting, the recovery, which I don't think really makes sense, of sacrifice of already pretty slim pickings in terms of corporate profitability to pay for other things, for necessary policy changes in terms of health, education, and maybe a basic income grant, which are all, I think, going to be the top of things in the speech. But really, remember, we already have an economic reconstruction and recovery plan. I don't think that's going to be ripped up. I think that's really going to be the basis still for things going forwards. And similarly, in terms of the language around infrastructure and other things that we've heard in the past that haven't unfortunately made very much progress in the past year.
Yeah, we were talking yesterday about the infrastructure program basically stalling, and that was key to the COVID-19 relief measures. All right, in terms of a basic income grant, because of the division, does that mean we possibly won't hear any big announcement, but maybe get an idea of where government is going in future?
Well, I think the main thing here is that the government and the president tomorrow is never going to announce a basic income grant. That's not really going to happen. Instead, what worries investors is we're on this sort of slippery path towards one. And we have a lot more discussion of the expenditure side, the positives of the expenditure side, certainly. I mean, giving people this money on a permanent basis or more than the 350 per month, is clearly going to make a very positive change to people's lives. It has to be funded ultimately, and that has deep consequences for the balance of savings and investments in the economy, of consumption versus investment, these sorts of things. And it's taking those two sides together, the impact of the spending and the impact of the funding, which really needs to be taken in the round. That's not what we're hearing so far really in this debate. And I think this is the worry that investors have. The SONA will probably talk and give hints at the guide path on the basic income grant, where we're going, but not really talk about those hard trade-offs. And neither does the budget want to do that either, because the budget and Treasury are viewing this more as a one-year SRD extension as opposed to a permanent policy change. Permanent policy changes, permanent expenditure changes require very, very different levels of detail in terms of tax and how you're going to fund things.
Well, the spectrum is there are those who say we cannot afford this. There are those on the other side who say we cannot afford not to give a basic income grant. More than 9 million people need this just to survive. Instability on the streets, never mind in the economy. Where do you stand on that spectrum?
Well, I mean, I think the point as an economist, someone looking, debt markets, etc., is that you can always do these things, but what are the consequences, right? So a basic income grant can be done, but it would almost certainly lead to a further step up in the amount of debt that would have to be issued. It would crowd out private sector investment, I think. The economy is not strong enough. The structural reforms that would make a basic income sustainable have not been successful enough to allow you just to have economic growth, revenue growth, to be able to make this affordable. And that's not the position that we're in. That's not the position the economy is going to be in the coming couple of years. And as a result, the number of people who are unemployed who will be claiming a grant will be going up and up. This is not and we're not in a place where this is a guide path really credibly to fewer and fewer people gaining a grant, etc., because they're gaining employment. So for me, the sort of which end of the spectrum thing is not as important as the fact you can do it, but there would be, I think, in this situation, some quite interesting negative consequences. Now, that's fine, and that's a political choice that can be made. The real problem here is I don't think we're going to really hear tomorrow enough decisiveness from the president on this, that we really fully understand him in making those kind of difficult choices and the trade-offs and laying out what those trade-offs are. And I think that's probably where, again, some of this communication challenge between the SONA and the budget will really come up.
Well, you are expecting an extension for at least a year. NEDLAC put some figures out. 95 billion, I think it was, just for the 350 rand to continue. Just put those figures into context. And does it mean higher taxes for those of us not receiving a grant?
So there's a lot of erroneous figures coming out. I mean, in the report we put out at the end of last year was quite critical of the work that went on, the modelling work that went on in NEDLAC. The cost of an SRD extension at 350 or just above 350 per month would come in at about 45 billion. And that's the sort of package and expense we're expecting. That is actually affordable for this year ahead because of the term to trade boon, the current account surplus, the export of mining products, and the tax off the back of that. It will be affordable for 1 year, but that's a commodity cycle. That's not a permanent revenue source that can be relied on by markets looking at fiscal sustainability or by Treasury. But we have to remember there's a lot of other demands into this budget as well, right? There are a massive amounts of cuts in the past which are having negative service delivery consequences, which maybe we need to trim back because more money is required for health and education for SOEs like dental that's got into trouble now. So, there is a much broader context in the budget this is really fitting into. But in and of itself, the money is probably available for a 1 year extension.
Yeah. And finally, the broader context is that we need more money coming in. How do you unlock growth when productivity has been affected by Eskom, when jobs are not happening, when the infrastructure, the works programs that were meant to create jobs are not happening? What would you like to hear from the president that would make you cheer tomorrow?
Well, I think we can't hear anything in some sense. We're waiting for delivery, right? We have an Operation Vulnerable team with an excellent agenda. We need them to deliver on that now. There are some very knotty issues which I think don't get discussed enough. For instance, the tensions between the microeconomic reforms and the more interventionist policies going on at DTIC, which I think are being quite damaging to the investment environment on the one hand versus the positive Operation Vulnerable reforms on the other. That tension between these two things I don't think gets discussed enough. I don't think the president will delve into that tomorrow in any meaningful detail, and that's why still we are challenged to turn around business sentiment. But the biggest thing around business sentiment here that's holding it back is really around the NPA. Actually, I think that's the most widely discussed issue that I'm having with businesses in South Africa. And again, there's not a huge amount the president really can offer tomorrow. He said he won't really comment on the Zonda report until the middle of the year, etc. So these key areas I'm not really expecting to come up tomorrow, but that's the kind of thing that will start to move the dial.
Yeah, again and again, these links are being made with crime and a lack of prosecution and what's going on in the economy. Thank you very much for your time tonight. That was Peter Tadmontalto, Head of Capital Markets Research at Intellidex.